None of this is income. Imputed rent doesn't exist. It's a figment of their imaginations. They're literally trying to tax imaginary money. And capital gains isn't income either, when a large part of it is actually just inflation. This is what passes for research in this country. And this, along with increasing the GST to 15% and mandating a 4-day working week, these are the ideas which are apparently going to be put on the table at Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's coming Talk Fest. We're in trouble. Australia is in serious trouble. Productivity is collapsing. The only growth sector in Australia is bludgeoning off taxpayers, whether on the dole or in a public service, or, as in this case, in taxpayer-funded research. We already lose more than half of our earnings to the government in one way or another, and more than half of all Australians already depend on government income. Again, whether that's through welfare or through a government job, it really doesn't make much of a difference to the equation. And all they can talk about now, in the situation we're in, is finding new ways to tax us and new ways to further degrade our productivity.
Hi, perhaps you recognize me. It's your favorite president.
We will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
Anybody in this country doesn't minimise their tax. They want their heads ring.
Socialists don't like ordinary people choosing, or they might not choose socialism.
The answer is might, because I want to do you slowly. I was saved by God to make America great again.
We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of Commanding the Narrative. My name is Stephen Tripp. Thank you for joining us tonight. If you are watching this live on Facebook, Rumble and YouTube, we have got the Rumble working again this week. So feel free to send through your chats on Rumble if you are following us there. And thank you to everyone who may be watching us later as well. If you are watching us live, as I said, you can contribute to the conversation through the chat. And if you're really game and not shy, hit that link to StreamYard if you want to call in and ask a question or have your say, whatever you feel like. We call it Talkback Streaming. It's a little bit like Talkback Radio, or it's a lot like Talkback Radio, but it's online. So hit that link if you're up to it. So let's kick it off, because we've got a really interesting discussion tonight. I think everyone's going to find this information very intriguing. So I guess to kick it off, the best way to support us is by heading to Buy Me a Coffee. And if you want to contribute to us in any small way or large way, whatever you choose, please head to Buy Me a Coffee and throw us a few dollars there. It helps to pay for the stream, it helps to pay for the website, and most importantly, gives me a very warm and fuzzy feeling inside. And if you'd really like to keep up to date with everything that we are doing, it's by heading to commandingthenarrative.com. Head straight to the website. Don't rely on the social media, even though we are going a lot better with the social media of late. Please head to commandingthenarrative.com. You'll find everything there. You can hit the sign up button in the top right hand corner to sign up to the website, and you'll get the newsletter. You'll be able to find all our previous episodes there, and also any recent articles that I might put out. Also, there's these 2 surveys there, which have been very popular. We've been getting a lot of feedback on these surveys. The first one is the Shaping the Future of Australia National Survey. That's been very popular, with over about 3,000 respondents. And also the Australian Political Parties National Survey. Please check that one out as well and have your say. If you want to know who's on the podcast this week, find it on the website as well. You'll get all the links to Facebook, Rumble, and YouTube there, and also any upcoming events like this one here next Sunday. Adelaide, Australians for Better Government is coming to you. It's the Revival Defining a New Direction for Australia event. It's going to be a very important discussion. I'm very excited about this, actually. A very important discussion about the future of Australia politically and with our governmental structure. From previous events with Australians for Better Government, we've had a lot of great speakers, a lot of important information. If you're in Adelaide, you're going to love it. So please come along. And we've got some great speakers. Again, Dr. Christopher Reynolds will be speaking. He's received a lot of great feedback from his speech on the Gold Coast. So if you're in Adelaide, you're going to be able to hear from him and buy his book as well. Mark Aldridge has just announced. We had Sarah Game drop out, unfortunately, but Mark Aldridge is a suitable fill-in, or I mean, not even a replacement. He's a great speaker in his own right, so he probably would have been joining us anyway. But it's great that we've had him come along. He's got a huge following in South Australia. Also, Michael Arben, who's a senior advisor for Senator Ralph Abet. Mark Neugebauer, who I did a podcast with just a week ago, and also a committee member of Australians for Better Government. He's going to be running in the upper house in the upcoming South Australian election. So you'll be able to hear from Mark, and also Councillor Henry Davis, who we had on the podcast a few weeks ago. So you'll be able to hear from him as well. So if you're in Adelaide, tickets are only $20. It is this upcoming Sunday, the 26th of October. So we would love to see you there. Please come along and support everything that we're trying to do at Australians for Better Government. All right, that's it from me. So let's get into tonight's interview. So a few weeks ago, we had a podcast called Is Australia on a Highway to Hell? And we looked at current trajectory, the current leaders that are in charge of this country, and really talked about the direction this country is going in. I feel like this episode tonight is a bit of a sequel to that podcast but that we did. This one's called Escape from Australia, just like the movies Escape from LA or Escape from New York. And it's all about having a plan B if the situation does come where maybe one day we'll have to leave Australia. I think we should stand and fight for this great country, but we need to explore all options. So we've got two great guests. Let's bring them on now. You'll know one of them, Shane Caudwell, and also Paul from Plan B. How are you going, guys?
Good, Steve. How are you, mate?
Very, very well, thank you. Now, Paul, we haven't had you on before, but I'm very interested in speaking to you. You have this group down in Paraguay in South America called Plan B. Can you tell us a little bit about your background first, who you are, and a little bit about Plan B as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I left or escaped Australia. It definitely felt like that at the time 4 years ago to move to Paraguay, which is a little country in South America on the other side of the world. First, I just came here just to live for myself and have a better quality of life than what I think I could get in Australia. And after a while, I realized that this country was really underrated and it had a lot to offer. So I started a business with another Australian friend of mine who moved here at the same time, helping people to come here, get residency and live and start what I would say is a better life here.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Shane, last time we had you on was the ex-candidates back in episode 97, mate. That's a long time ago, but
well,
it was a good chat. If anyone watched that episode, you would know that Shane's a former UN peacekeeper, and you've spent a lot of time in some pretty tight and gruesome conflicts around the world, trying to bring peace. But one of the comments that you made at the end of that podcast was that you've seen communist countries close up, socialist countries close up, and the trajectory that we're on here in Australia right now really concerned you. And you were even talking about getting out of Australia at that point. Has the situation changed for you? Has your idea of Australia changed? Mate, give us a bit of an update of where you're at.
It's changed, but all I've really done is I've sped up the process, if you like. I think if we get 24 seats in the lower house and 12 in the upper house in addition, we're never going to see anything other than a socialist government in Australia. So to me, I think the time to vote, the time to change is now over. I'm heading towards retirement. I've spent a lot of my life in conflict zones and all that, and I don't really want to be in another one. I look at my parents who are in their 70s and 80s, and I don't think I can have the quality of life they have by staying in Australia. So I decided to look outside Australia, and there was really nowhere in the world I couldn't go, financially, any other parameter. And, I spent years in Europe, I spent years in the Middle East, many years in Asia, time in Africa, and everything kept taking me back to South America for a number of reasons. And after a lot of research and travel over there, looking at different countries, I decided that Paraguay was the best option for me. And after a lot more research, I got in contact with Paul. So that's where I am at the moment, is making inroads into that plan.
Now, Paul, I mean, growing up here in Australia, we were always told we're the lucky country, and in a lot of ways we were. I mean, we live in paradise here. We have, we've always had favourable economic conditions. I mean, everyone felt pretty comfortable, at least during the Howard area. I think things have changed a lot since then. It might be confronting for a lot of Australians to even consider maybe heading to a new country for a new life just to escape what's happening here in Australia. I mean, it's not something I don't think a lot of people here in Australia would ever have considered. But for you, what are some of the reasons why everyday Australians should consider leaving Australia and moving to Paraguay?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, there's a lot of reasons. The first thing I would say is, in Australia, until you move to another country, let's say like Paraguay, and really experience it, you start to forget just how micromanaged you are in Australia, just how, just simple everyday freedoms you don't have. There's always some rule that you're breaking, or a potential fine that you could get. And just coming to a place where you're almost completely left alone by the government here. As long as you're sensible, you're respectful, you'll be fine. And just going back to that, I think was just an amazing feeling. Like for me, when I first moved here, it kind of reminded me, I grew up in Perth in the 90s. It was a bit more rough and tumble. And it felt like almost going 20 years back in time, before you were just so, just controlled, and just like before the government and everything became so overbearing. The other thing is, then there's also, I feel the opportunity, whereas, I love Australia like you do. I have decided to leave. But I feel like in Australia, you're going to be there. Every year, you're going to be fighting over a smaller piece of the pie. Whereas in a country like Paraguay, it's starting at a lower base, but every year I can see it getting better. And just being in a country where there's optimism and things are getting better, it's just so different when, it's kind of a bit depressing when things seem to be getting worse year after year.
So tell us a little bit about Paraguay. I mean, maybe some people won't even be able to find it on the map or know anything about it. Its economic position, its political position. I mean, maybe the even what language they speak there. So give us a bit of a background on the country itself.
Yeah, so it's quite a small country of about 6 or 7 million people in the middle of South America. Now, out of all the countries in South America, it's the most right-wing or conservative politically. And so because of that, it's a country where there's a high degree of freedom, there's low taxes, and there's also, a much cheaper cost of living here. It's still, there you go, we're in Asuncion, if you zoom in a little bit more. It's still on the developing side of things. So in some places it's a little bit rough, but every year you see it's getting better. And I think just the standard of living you can have here is just completely eclipse what you can afford back in Australia these days.
We're just looking at the map there. We see that it's landlocked, so you're not expecting beaches or coastlines or anything like that. I mean, for a lot of Aussies living on the coastline, living near the beach, what's that like living there? Is there rivers and lakes, and is there any chances of getting to the water?
You can, like the nice beaches in Brazil are about a 2-hour flight away. So yeah, I mean, in a way, Paraguay is not perfect. It's not Bali, for example, but you almost have to take the good and the bad. And I think the positive aspects outweigh it. Like you talk about Paraguay as a plan B. I think a real way to look at it is, a lot of people see Paraguay as, we like to call it like a natural bunker. Yeah. And what I mean by this is, Paraguay is a country that produces all its own food. It's food independent. It's completely energy independent from the hydroelectricity. It's completely fresh water independent, and it's also politically irrelevant. Yeah, so whatever happens in Australia, Southeast Asia, Europe, North America, any sort of conflict, I can guarantee you come here, things are going to keep going on as normal. It's going to be stable. It's going to be peaceful. And so you're right. It's not the most exciting place. It doesn't have the beaches, but it just has that nice standard of living where you can feel safe and sort of away from a lot of the other problems in the world.
What about you, Shane? I mean, you've been there now. You've seen it, and you've done a bit of travel right across South America. I mean, you've sent through some photos, which I'll bring on the screen in a moment while you're speaking. But what was your impression when you first hopped off the plane and saw Paraguay up close?
Paul, I remember I jumped in the car with Paul and we sort of headed from the airport into town. And like any second world country, it's a bit, it can look a little bit rough. And he started to explain it to me. And he didn't really know much about my history. And I made a joke. I said, well, I haven't seen a dead body yet, so we're all good. And I just spent 3 months there this year. I spent 2 months last year. You can find the Louis Vuitton shops and Prada and Porsche, and you can find all of those shops in Villamora, Recoleta, Shopping del Sol and Paseo, places like that. So you can be absolutely cutting edge first world, or you can be, in a plastic chair in the middle of nowhere eating empanadas with a grandmother, an hour later. One thing I noticed, I'm sort of very aware, I looked at the clothing that the men my age might wear if I really needed to blend in and travel. They have dinner there late. So 9 o'clock, there you go, that's Carcupe, 9 o'clock to midnight. And you'll see women leaving dinner, single women walking the streets by themselves. So there's no gremlins. You walk past the Mercedes dealer and it's like we used to have in Australia. We're literally just a little single chain row fence to delineate it, but there's nothing to stop people, getting into that yard, things like that. To me, it feels very safe and very comfortable. That's a town called Encarnacion, looking out over Posadas in Argentina. I love that town. It was spectacular, and you've got a beach there, so they have quite a festive little beach, the Playa, down the other side of that junction. That was a really nice bus trip down there. I stayed in a beautiful hotel. That's just where they had the world. And I love old trucks, so I'm definitely having one of those. I found it very safe, very comfortable, very pleasant, very enjoyable. I'm not really a beach person. I've always sort of been a mountain person, bush person. I'd much prefer that. And every day I woke up and in one little increment more of this is a good decision, this is the right move, this is a good place to have a comfortable retirement where I won't have to deal with some of the issues and problems I have to deal with here in Australia. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. You were saying before we started, like, some of these images are not all Paraguay, but they are the countries that you went through in South America. I suppose you could view it a little bit like Europe. I mean, if you're living in one of these countries, I mean, to go across the border and travel is a lot easier than it would be living here in Australia. Is that right?
It's ridiculously easy. I got my temporary residence last year through Paul, and this year I got my cedula, my national ID card, my driver's licenses. So my thoughts were, and I'm sort of, I suppose, pumping Paul's tyres a little bit. I was very careful. I don't want to be 80 years old like I could be in Asia, and found that the visa agent I used did the dodgy out the back door, and that gets discovered. And at 80, I'm trying to deal with the fallout of a poor decision I wasn't aware I made. So I wanted to be very, upfront, strict, focused, and all the rest of it. So when I got the cedula, one of my plans was to start traveling through the Mercosur countries and see exactly how all this works. So I left Paraguay, down to Encarnacion, entered Argentina, went all through Argentina, went down south, came back to Buenos Aires, got the ferry across to Montevideo, spent 2 weeks traveling in Uruguay, out to Colonia, got the ferry back to Colonia to Buenos Aires, came from Buenos Aires back up to Paraguay, and I did that all on my cedula, my Paraguayan ID card. So it makes travel very, very simple, easy, and comfortable. Like, I don't think I spent more than 2 or 3 minutes at every border crossing, customs in the whole trip. And absolutely, I wanted to do it all legitimately. I had my Australian passport, but it wasn't required. And those places you've been showing there, they were all places I went to and stayed on this trip. Each country's different. Some are more expensive than others. Some are a little easier to travel. Some are a little bit harder. But you literally open that entire bottom half of South America up in a way that that Australians can't really imagine. If if we could fly to Thailand and land with our driver's license and just travel all over Asia on our driver's license, that to me is about the equivalent of what I just was able to do in Paraguay. Very simple. And again, support from these guys. It was pretty funny. One night I was talking to another guy at Plan B, and he'd rung me on a group chat. And we were talking about building, actually. I work in construction. And next minute, bang, bang, we've got a couple of more phone calls from people. Are you okay? Has anything gone wrong? It's 10:30 at night. And we're like, oh, no, actually, we're talking about concrete. Sorry about that, But that was the availability to have somebody to talk to if you get a little bit stuck. It went really well. I don't think I've done a trip where I was as comfortable and as relaxed and had as good a time in I don't know how many years. It was fantastic. And the pictures you showed there of that 17th century Spanish villa, that's an Airbnb, and that's exactly what it looks like. That's where you have your coffee in the morning.
Right.
We sat out in that lounge room with the owner, and that was how your day started. It was amazing.
Yeah, so it sounds, Paul, it sounds like you've got a bit of a community set up there. There's a network already in place. It's not like you're having to flee Australia and just rock up in a foreign land with no one to help you. Go through some of the options that people have, because obviously we're talking about having to move out of Australia, because of the current situation politically, or potentially if it gets worse. But a lot of people do this out of retirement as well, where they live in a country. Maybe when it's winter here, they go to the summer there. I know we're on the same side of the equator, so you can't really do that with Australia and Paraguay. But some people live in a country 3 months, 6 months of the year as a retirement option. Other people might want to live there long term or permanently. So, from your perspective, what are some of the options that you can help people with in that regard?
Yeah, so the how you get it's basically the same, but the reasons people get it for is a bit different. So how you get it is you get a few documents in Australia, your birth certificate and your criminal record check. You make sure your passport is recent. You come to Asuncion, where we are the capital, for a week. We submit all your documents. 12 weeks later, you have your temporary residency card and your ID card, and then you're basically good to go. You start with a 2-year temporary residency, where you spend 1 day of each of those years in Paraguay. Then after that, minimum, I should say, then after that, you can convert it to a permanent residency, and you're basically good to go. So some people just keep it as a backup. They want to keep living in Australia or Canada or the States, wherever. And then, they can come to Paraguay and escape to Paraguay should they need to. And then some people like myself and Shane, we actually really like the country and the style of living here. And we live here, more months of the year. But what initially attracted me to Paraguay is just how easy the temporary residency is. You're looking at, let's say, I don't know, 3 to 5 grand Aussie to do the process. And then it's 2 years temporary, and then you have this permanent residency. You can come and go. You can spend 4 or 5 years away from Paraguay if you need to, but it's always there to return to should you want to.
When you started out, did you consider some other countries first? Was Paraguay your first option?
It wasn't. Just like I imagine 99% of your viewers, they've never heard of Paraguay before.
Yeah.
So about 4 years ago, when I left Australia, the sexy place to go was Panama, and they had a similar program. And just before I was about to go, it went from costing $5,000 to do the service to a $200,000 real estate investment. So I took it out of my budget. I basically paid for a call with an expert. He went through all these countries, and he brought up Paraguay. Never heard of it before, but it looked good on paper. So I thought, well, let's give it a shot. I plan to spend, a couple months here and move on. And like I said, 4 years later, I've sort of come here and I haven't really left yet.
What about you, Shane? When you first heard the option of going to Paraguay, were you hesitant? Did you think, I don't know anything about this place, or did you know about it already through your peacekeeping efforts?
No, I'd done I'd flown through South America a few times. Possibly easier for me. In my head, I'm escaping Australia. That's the way I feel like it. I'm escaping a situation and a problem that I no longer want to deal with and no longer want to be a part of. As I said, I spent 7 years in Europe, so I knew Europe very well. I looked at Italy, Croatia, Bosnia. There's a possibility to go back there. I looked at a whole bunch of things, and for a lot of reasons, I decided Europe wasn't for me. I looked at East Africa, particularly Tanzania and Zanzibar. I still love it. Great holiday destination. But for a number of reasons, South America came on top. I spent 6 years in Asia. I looked at Asia. I really looked at Asia. I had a business there. I had a few other things there. But for a number of reasons, decided Asia wasn't the permanency I needed. For me, it was Paraguay. It's not an easy option. That's not right. It is easy to get. It's easy to maintain, providing you've dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's. Paul and Plan B make it a lot easier. And I very quickly came to realise, conservative government is very important to me. Firearms ownership and gun sports I've done my whole life, very important to me. Riding motorcycles, obviously very important to me. And the access I have to South America, to enduro races, to all those sorts of things was all there. The more I looked into it, the more South America turned out to be the place where I could pursue everything I want to pursue, that there was nothing that I had to give up. If I went to Asia, I'd have to give up the shooting sports. If I went to, and things like that, there was just nothing I had to give up there. Paraguay, I'd done a lot of research by the time I arrived. I mean, between YouTube and blogs and all those sorts of things, I had a fairly good idea of what it looked like. I've got to say I was pleasantly surprised. It was a lot more functioning, and if you want to call it first world, than I thought it would be. And then very quickly I realised I can have everything I want here at a very reasonable price. I mean, last time I was there a few weeks back, I went with some people looking at apartments, and you want to see what 200,000 Australian dollars will buy you in Asuncion. You'll have a very, very nice 2-bedroom apartment, in a good up and coming area. Ubers are cheap, food is cheap, life is good. There's just nothing to detract from it. I'm not particularly worried about safety issues. What's that I was saying is, excuse me, I'd rather a dangerous freedom than a peaceful safety or something like that. But it's not even a dangerous freedom. It's, it never ever struck me as somewhere where you had to be, particularly careful and looking over your shoulder.
Let me just take you back a step, because you raised a lot of topics and issues there that I want to dig into a little bit further. But the first one was, you said you want to escape Australia, and I guess that's the title of this podcast. I mean, you've done a lot of traveling and you've lived in a lot of places around the world. A lot of people that do that here in Australia come back and they go, oh, thank God we live in Australia. Whereas you've had the opposite reaction and you want to get out. And you mentioned that in the last podcast, as I mentioned before. Can you expand on that? What are you seeing happening in Australia that's making you so concerned?
They're taking my freedom away. The absolute top of my list, I will live in a bark hut, living on water buffalo milk, whatever I have to do to have complete freedom. And Australia is absolutely every week another piece of that's removed. You look at what happened in Western Australia with the West Australian government, dealing with supposed sovereign citizens and their firearms ownership. You look at what's happening in December with the digital ID system. You look at all these things. And if we end up with 24 lower house politicians and 12 upper house politicians, which we will, there's no way that at that point, the tipping point has been reached. And I don't think voting will change anything. And I have no wish whatsoever to go out there and throw Molotov cocktails and argue and yell and shout and man the barricades. I'm done with that. I want a peaceful, pleasant, quiet life. And absolutely, the number one driver for me is freedom. And there is no freedom left. Well, there's very little freedom left, and it's disappearing fast. So I plan on not being here once all those freedoms have gone. And I know people, I work with people, I deal with people that are absolutely prepared to write every freedom, their children's, their grandchildren's, and every generation moving forward, if they can supposedly have a safe life. But, tell a sushi chef in Melbourne that she's got a safe life after what happened the other day. This is now common on our streets. And the government is hell-bent. I mean, you look at Queensland petition on castle laws, largest petition ever tabled in Queensland. I really can't see this happening. It's, there's just nothing here. It's a society in freefall. And, I hear all these people it's funny, you hear the slogan, if you don't love it, leave. Okay, I don't love it and I'm leaving. And then you want to hear the grief against that. You know, that's it's like, well, it's your slogan. I'm leaving. I'm not creating any dramas. I'm not annoying anybody. I'm not doing anything. I just want to be somewhere else. You know, and I just, that for me is the absolute first driver, and everything else is a distant second, is my personal freedom. And I don't want a personal freedom to commit crime or do anything nefarious. I just want to be left alone.
Can I also add something to that, Steve, as well?
Yeah, of course.
So I see a lot of your viewers are saying, you know, stay and fight, stay and fight. Well, from what I can tell, all of us are European, right? So why did our ancestors stay and fight in Europe? Europe was falling apart, and we're like, you know what? Let's give another country another shot. And so we moved to Australia, and we spent however many generations our families did in Australia. I imagine when my family came to Australia, they didn't kiss the ground and say, this is the country we're going to be in for the end of time. You know, I think all of us left a bad situation for a better one. That's in our blood. And now we're doing this in Paraguay. So I can appreciate the nationalism to stay in Australia, but you know, I don't remember signing a contract saying that I'm going to be stuck in a bad situation forever. You know, I'm going to try and find a better situation for me and my children one day.
Yeah. Well, expand on that a little bit, because I mean, you look at South America, a lot of people think communist countries and, you know, a lot of left-leaning countries. You're saying that Paraguay is far more conservative. What is the political situation in Paraguay, and is there potential for it to go left one day? I mean, that seems to be what we're concerned about, going towards a socialist or communist sort of system where you have no freedom. But you know, what's the current situation politically with Paraguay, and is there potential for it to change long term?
Yeah, so Paraguay is basically, there's a center-right party that's basically been in power since democracy, which is roughly 30 years. I don't see it changing anytime soon. And part of the reason is it's kind of like a little country that got to see all these socialist countries around it really fall apart. Yeah, so to the south of us is Argentina, which has been a failed socialist country for, you know, 60, 70 years. And I think what the Paraguayans do, they're like, look how bad things are down south. Let's do the opposite of that, you know, and it's been showing that it's working. So, you know, I don't have a crystal ball. Things could eventually change, but at least for now, the country's growing. They're realizing that free market and conservative values are what's bringing the country forward, and I don't really see that changing anytime soon.
What about you? I mean, I do value your perspective, Shane, because you know, you've been in conflicts around the world. I mean, you've seen these things up close. I mean, obviously you've given us your assessment of Australia. Now you've seen Paraguay, and you've probably kept an eye on the situation politically. What do you think about it?
I think exactly the same. And I've gone to the extent I've downloaded some of the speeches made by members of the Colorado Party, and I've read them. I've looked into how the Iguazu Falls Dam came about and the input of the Guarani chiefs. I've spent a lot of time, probably more than I needed to convince myself, but I enjoyed looking at it anyway. I see it as a conservative government that's going to stay that way. And everybody I spoke to there fully realises the mess that Argentina's in. When I was in Buenos Aires a couple of weeks back, everybody you spoke to said, yeah, it's hard, it's expensive, it's tough, Milei's doing what he's doing. But all of them pretty much alluded or said that, you know, if we don't do it, our children will have to. And I think Paraguay's seen those lessons and learnt those lessons. And I mean, the other thing is there's no way Paul and I could ever sit there and go, it'll never change. Nobody can do that anywhere in the world. But if you have the right mindset and you have the ability and you've set yourself up well, you know, I might have to move again. I don't want to, and I don't think I'll have to. But, you know, the people in your chat there that talk about stay and fight, you know, all right, so once you can't vote anymore because basically you're out of the process, it's the Labor Party divides a bunch of safe seats, add more politicians, voting's not going to work. You can protest to a certain extent, but you've only got to look at what the Herald Sun described today. I saw the Victorian police officer showing the bricks that were being thrown by the Antifa and left-wing agitators. The Herald Sun said completely the opposite, you know. So you've got a bought and paid for press that you'll never receive the truth from in general. these people that say stay and fight, what's your next choice? You think you watch Red Dawn 3 times and you'd see YouTube videos on Minutemen in America doing their magazine loadout. You know, are you for real? Half these guys, when was the last time you ran 5K? When were, you know, all these things? They're just, it's a fantasy and it's ridiculous, and you just make yourself a target. And you know, if you want to run around shooting your mouth off like that, you probably deserve what you get. But to my way of thinking, if Australia has gone down, you know, we believe we have a democracy. I don't believe it's well structured, let's put it that way. But if that's what 51% of Australians do, even if it's been done by nefarious means, well, my choice is I either put up with it or I leave. And the simple choice is leaving. I would much rather go somewhere else and say, you know, have a relaxing life and do all those sorts of things. I mean, I really, really want to contribute to Paraguay. I've seen business opportunities, but I want to retire. But I've thought about things like, well, they don't have a men's shed concept. And for a young Paraguayan kid to come in to learn to set the suspension up on his dirt bike, or to an old cabinet maker teaches him how to, you know, do woodwork, that sort of thing is handing back to Paraguay. I've been in my local fire brigade for 20 years and they have a volunteer fire brigade over there. I'd love to hand back that way. I think all those things are available with Paraguay. You've got to, you know, obviously I enjoy a little bit of adrenaline in my life, and I think I can still have that enjoyment. There's one of the trips I want to do, I was telling Paul about, there's like the African Queen riverboat leaves Concepcion and heads up to the Bolivian border, and people talk about it and they're living in hammocks and there's chickens and ducks and you name it. I want to get a motorbike on board. I want to get it up there and then I want to ride back from the border. I mean, the world's running out of adventures and I'm running out of time. So Paraguay, I believe, can provide all that for me, and I think it will remain a stable conservative government that I can respect.
See, I tend to lean more towards what the people were saying in the chat. I mean, when I consider this country and its history and the natural resources that we've got, I mean, we've got everything: tourism, agriculture. I mean, it's a wonderful place. We're living in paradise. We're so blessed. But I mean, it is true that in recent years I have been becoming concerned, especially because I have small kids and I'm concerned about their future and the direction that the country's going. So I am one of these people that are like, okay, let's stay and fight and try and get Australia to reach its true potential, which I think would be unbelievable if we did get strong government that could point Australia into the right direction and achieve its potential. But I think you do need a plan B. I think that's exactly, I think you've hit the nail on the head with your name there, Paul, because it's not about you know, just packing up and going. I think you need to have a security blanket or a safety net or something like that in your back pocket, at least to consider if things really do go wrong. And I think, you know, Shane, you can probably see things more clearly than the rest of us, but I think it could get to a stage where things could go really bad very, very soon with censorship and mandates or whatever it might be. But Shane,
absolutely. And I mean, you know, you've got small kids. I would hate to be in a position where I have to sit down in front of my kids one day and go, I am so sorry. You are now part of a society I can't extract you from. My actions weren't enough. I wasn't able to do enough. We were, you know, the left wing took control of the university in the 70s. They're getting to the end of a 50-year cycle. You know, my thoughts are that basically it's done and dusted. I think for a lot of people now, a plan B and an option for your children is literally the best thing you can have in place. You don't have to go full time. You don't have to whatever. But if you can turn around one day to your child and go, you know what, you need to go make your way in the world, and you'll do it better somewhere else. You know, I'm going to do a better retirement, but I'm coming to the end of my life. You know, and I've lived a lot more than I will live. You know, and people talk about Australia is a wonderful country. It does have the resources. They won't be exploited. But to my right, I've got every unit badge I ever served with in the Australian military. There's some medals in boxes in there that I don't wear. You know, I've done my bit. I've worked hard. I've been a volunteer at, you know, countless fires, deaths, you know, you name it. It's all been there. Like, to me now is just, please leave me alone to have a quite enjoyable life. I don't watch television. I voraciously read books. And that's what it looks like. But I think for younger families with children, It's really getting to the point where you have to be able to offer your children something different. They don't have to take it, but there has to be something there to say, look, you have an out, you have an exit, you have a plan. We have a block of land in Paraguay or Thailand, whatever you think it's going to be. But I think for people that don't prepare in that way, you're leaving your family at a disadvantage.
Well, maybe pick up on that point, Paul. I mean, for people that are not ready to take the plunge now, what are the options? And maybe let's say people have got, and I don't think many people do, but let's say people got a lazy 200,000 laying around. They think, well, maybe I'll buy a property in Paraguay, so I've got somewhere to go. And they might, go holiday there, or they might spend a month there or 2 months every year. Can you explain that, that option a little bit more? And does Plan B help to facilitate that?
Sorry, just before Paul answered, you don't need a lazy 200,000. That was just an example of very high-end units that I was looking at. Yeah. You need a lot less than 200,000. Sorry, back to you, Paul.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, so that's right. So, we mentioned the residencies around 2,000 to 3,000, but I mean, what it starts with is first getting your residency, visiting that 1 day a year for a week, familiarizing yourself with the country, so, and it's funny, what's crazy is that Australia set the precedent that, hey, we're going to lock you guys in Australia if we want to. When I left 4 years ago, I had to ask for permission, beg to basically leave Australia during coronavirus. I was so excited when Australia actually gave me the opportunity just to leave. So it's very clear that this could happen again. So I would say start simple. Don't, sell your house and just chuck it in some random property in Paraguay. Get your residency, visit 1 day a year, get familiarized with yourself. So hopefully Australia turns around. You never have to go here and move your family or whatever. That's what I would hope, but at least have it as a backup option. Have it as something that, okay, things are getting really weird here. I'm going to grab the kids. We're going to book some flights to Paraguay. We know where we like to stay. Maybe they know a little Spanish. Maybe I got a school in mind I can send the kids to right away. So just really work on that that checklist or that little backup should you need it. So that can give you that peace of mind.
Yeah, like when you consider countries like South Africa, I mean, there's a lot of people there that want to get out, but they're locked in, not locked in by the government, but they're locked in economically. I mean, they just don't have the money anymore to get out. And, people might be thinking that they own a property here and they're safe and they might be able to get out if the time comes. But there's more and more legislation coming in that's very, very concerning. Like this one from Victoria. I mean, this came in a few years ago. It's the windfall gains tax on farmland rezoning. Now, what it means is that the Victorian government might rezone farmland, and if it's more than $100,000, the owner may be subject to windfall gains tax, which can be as high as 50% of the total value uplift. So what it's basically saying is if the Victorian government rezones your land, if you're on a farmland, and now it might be residential or something like that is considered to be more valuable, you would have to pay the tax on what that uplift would be. So if you own a property that's $1 million, now it's considered to be $1.5 million. Suddenly you're having to pay a huge amount of tax just to be able to keep your farm, and you might not be able to sell. I mean, that might be the situation. So people can get locked in economically as well. So tell us about. You're saying that people have to just live there for 1 day or visit 1 day per year to keep a permanent residency. I mean, that doesn't sound too hard. I mean, that sounds pretty easy. Do they have to? How long does that last? I mean, is there a time limit on that or anything like that? Can you just explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So you start with a 2-year temporary residency. Yeah, so during that time, you need to spend 1 day in each of those 2 years in Paraguay, right? And then after that, you change it to a permanent residency, which is almost good as a citizenship, minus the passport and the right to vote here. And with that, it's 1 day every 3 years. So there's a bit more of an investment in time in the first 2 years. And then after that, it's something you can go back to. But I think, to be honest, I don't want to minimize how it is difficult to get here. We're literally on the other side of the world. It's 6:40 a.m. right now. So you're looking at maybe 20, 24 hours of flights, which isn't cheap. And it's also, you're going to be very jet lagged when you first get here. So there is an investment. And unfortunately, not everyone's going to be able to afford to get a second residency in a place like Paraguay. So I'm not pretending this is a magic bullet for everyone. But I think if you do have the means, it can make sense, especially, if there's if you have a lot of wealth from your property, for example, it's kind of a fraction of that particular wealth. So I wish it was for everyone. It's not everyone's going to be able to afford it, but if you can, it does make sense.
All right, I want to dig into a few other issues. Maybe we can move through some of these quickly. I mean, but one of my concerns is, I go to countries when I'm traveling. My wife is German, so when we go to Germany, like, they speak English there, but I still feel, I still feel bad that I don't speak German. I'm looking at Paraguay, and I see that the official language is, they have two official languages. One's Spanish, and the other one's, I'm probably going to say this wrong, Guarani. I don't know if I said that right. I don't even know what that is. I mean, you can explain that, Paul. But
Yeah.
what is the situation for Australians coming to Paraguay? Do we need to learn Spanish before we go? Do we need to learn Guarani? Or do plenty of people in Paraguay speak English?
Yeah, so I'm going to be honest. It's like, imagine some Chinese guy comes to Australia. Would you expect him to learn English eventually? I mean, you would. So the truth is, like, there's not much English here. Yeah. So, and this is kind of that barrier to entry where it's a little bit harder. You do have to learn Spanish, but then it stops a place getting overwhelmed with people, like Bali or places like that, where it's just everyone sort of speaking English. And it's, so yes, I would say if you're living here long term, you're going to want to learn Spanish. If it's a plan B, no, you don't really need it. You can learn a few phrases while you visit. The language is called Guarani, and it's a native language, right? So it's kind of interesting in Paraguay. The Spanish and the native people, they mix together, and the integration was quite successful. So when you look at Paraguayans, everyone's mestizo, which is a mixture of Spanish and indigenous blood, and the indigenous culture is still alive here. It's well integrated in society. In Asuncion, where I live, it's basically all Spanish. But if you want to be like Shane and have a ranch or somewhere a bit more rural, it probably would help to learn a bit of Guarani. So I would say yes, if you come here, you want to learn Spanish. And I also think out of respect to the country, we should be learning Spanish if we're here. Like, I don't want in the same way it'd frustrate you you're in a tram in Melbourne or whatever, and like everyone's speaking other languages around you. You kind of hope that people would speak the mother tongue in that language. So it's going to take some time to learn, but I think it's worth it if you're really committed to living here.
What about you, Shane? Did you struggle with that when you first went?
No, but my Spanish isn't that great. So I got online and I found a Paraguayan Spanish teacher, and Paul's met her. She's a lawyer in a town called Villarica. Lovely, lovely lady. Speaks Spanish, speaks English, and speaks Guarani. So when this started, I do one lesson a week with her. I went out and bought all the Spanish children's books on, El Gato and Le Cloche, and I'm at the point now, and your first stage, as Paul describes, is probably the ability to navigate a taxi, a restaurant, do a little bit of shopping, and basic conversations. I'm there now. I think for me, though, I didn't have any fear. A lot of people they're worried about talking. I don't care. I'll spit it out. They'll laugh and we'll work it out. And the last thing is Google Translate works very, very well. So I'm at the point now where I pick up 2 or 3 words in most conversations. So I'm trying to expand my vocabulary. If I want to unlock everything South America's got to offer, I'm going to be in the middle of nowhere. I'm going to have a carburetor full of rubbish and a fuel tank full of this and a flat tire and a broken chain and all the rest of it. I need to be able to manage all of that, and I absolutely will. I plan on having a very good time, and Spanish is part of it. So head down and study, head down and get good at Spanish. And the other thing is again, talking about Plan B, you sign up with a fairly high-end, well-structured, well-connected group of people to assist you in the endeavours. I don't want to be the person that lets that group down. I don't, the obnoxious gringo in a Billabong t-shirt and a set of double pluggers wandering around annoying the locals. I want to be a long way from that person. So it behoves me to get better, and I will. You know, I didn't have any problem this last trip. I managed it with a lot of laughter and good humour. They ask you what your name is, and the quickest thing is to have a joke and say Papa Noel, you know, Father Christmas. That breaks the ice, and you're all good.
Well, we don't have all big beards like you, mate. We can't get away with that. But
Yeah.
But Paul, talk to me about the economy. I noticed that you put a clip out about Bitcoin. We know El Salvador has really embraced Bitcoin. Expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so to begin with, the average person is quite humble. Yeah, so I think the average wage in Asuncion in Aussie dollars is probably about $14,000 a person a year. Yeah, so if you're considering what your living expenses are, if you can get to that for 1 year in Paraguay, you can live as well as a local. And then, if you can manage more than that, you're going to do better. It's primarily an agricultural economy. Paraguay is really, really known for high quality beef. Paraguay and Argentina, I would say, have the highest quality, cheapest beef in the world. If you follow us on Twitter and the socials, you see we're always posting pictures of steaks because we're into that. The other big part of the economy is it has a huge hydroelectric dam, which is right on the border of Brazil, and what this does is this dam produces so much power. There's actually an incredible surplus of electricity. Yeah, so much so that Paraguay has an excess, and they sell the excess back to Brazil at a very low cost. So the thing about Bitcoin is, to create Bitcoin, you use something called a miner, which is a very energy intensive process. But if you're able to do it, you can effectively create Bitcoins out of nowhere and get very well paid. And so because Paraguay has very, very cheap electricity here, look, there's some of the states for the people that are looking at the screen. Because Paraguay has very
I'm getting hungry, mate. Just looking at that. It looks like
that actually looks like a La Cabrera steak. I could even tell what restaurant that is just by because the energy is so cheap, you have all these Bitcoin mining coming here as well, which I think it's another thing if you're more conservative, more self-sovereign, and a lot of people into crypto as well. So it's kind of interesting because of the cheap electricity and the other factors, the type of industries that are developing in Paraguay. There you go. There's a nice big steak for you. That's the tomahawk. Look at that. So, for example, this is a tomahawk steak right here. Now, I remember in Perth, a huge tomahawk like that. You go to like a high-end steak restaurant, it might be 80, maybe even $100 for a steak like that. In Paraguay, this would be in Aussie dollars, maybe about $17, I would say, for that particular steak. Like, I'm going off topic here because you distracted me. I haven't had it's crazy.
No, but you're talking about Bitcoin and the economy.
Yeah. So the economy, I think it's growing at like maybe 4 or 5% each year. So it's definitely above the average because it's like a conservative economy. It's not some debt-fueled bubble which just has a huge takeoff. You're just getting nice stable growth year after year in Paraguay. The other thing that's really interesting from the business perspective, right? And Shane mentioned thinking about starting a few businesses here. What's kind of neat and interesting about Paraguay is I mentioned it's going back to the 90s. It's also going back to the 90s, like in terms of business processes, in the services that are available. So if you have an idea or a business that's successful in Australia in 2025, you take that to Paraguay, it's probably going to do very well. One, because no one else is doing it. And the other thing is, I love Latin culture, I love Latin people, but they're not the most professional and hardworking generally. So if you come here and you bring that Australian work ethic and that professionalism, you can actually start a business here and do very well in the local economy.
Now, mate, I distracted you with the steaks there. I've noticed another distraction on your X page. Now, I'm a married man, so this doesn't apply for me, but all the single men out there,
Right.
and maybe single ladies as well that are watching. What are the actual people of Paraguay like? I mean, is there, dating opportunities for single people that want to go over there?
I mean, for starters, I don't like to oversell it too much because I don't want it to be about that. But if you are a single man, I will say there's a lot of opportunity here. And what was so what was so surprising to me is
Mate,
you get
put this
young,
stuff
beautiful
up on
women.
your-
Right. Well, that's my business partner. That's my business partner. You get young, beautiful women here, like under 30, and they're conservative. You know, like imagine trying to find like a young chick that's conservative and beautiful and not messed up in Australia. You know, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. Whereas the country is conservative in general. Like the girls here, they lean right. They're not falling for the commie stuff. Like my girlfriend likes Trump more than I do. Like it's just crazy that you can find these more traditional girls. They care about having a family. They care about motherhood. If they can be supported, they want to stay in the home. They want to do the traditional thing. And I think it's very different than perhaps the dating market you're used to in Australia.
I'd say being a single man and just having spent 3 months over there, I mean, my demographic in Asia is a bunch of old white guys in Singer singlets with their young bar girlfriend who think they've won the lottery because they've only needed to take a course of doxycycline twice this year. That's not my tribe. I don't want to be there. What I found in Paraguay was very intelligent. What I would expect in the 90s is that you have a discussion, you form a friendship, you talk about common interests, you go through a process. I found it to be very, very pleasant, very nice, very easy, no expectations, no dramas. And again, I'm closer to 60, and there are a lot of beautiful Paraguayan women that are only too happy to come and have a chat. And despite what people might think, most of the ones I met, they don't want your passport. They don't want to move to Australia or the US or Canada or anywhere. They want to stay in Paraguay. You know, I think you're going back to what dating was like in the 80s and 90s, as far as I can see, is, I don't know if Tinder's a thing. I don't have a Tinder profile, but I found it to be very, very nice to go out, to go socialising, everything that was going on was very pleasant, respectful, enjoyable.
What about...
Could I just have one anecdote? I was talking to my girlfriend yesterday. I was like, there's a lot more expats coming. Like, what is the average Paraguayan thinking about all these expats? And she's like, well, at least for the girls, everyone's thinking, it's time to kazak, which means it's time to hunt. Yeah, so I think a lot of the girls see, there's these expats coming in. They know they've probably got more financial means than maybe the regular guys. So a lot of the local girls are on the hunt now, seeing these new guys coming.
Well, there you go. There you go. All the single men out there, maybe the single ladies as well. Maybe that's another incentive for you guys to check out Paraguay. But Shane, what about your assessment on crime and law and order? I mean, you said before that you felt pretty safe in Paraguay.
I sort of understand that my history is checkered in places that had no law and order. So if I'm not having a gunfight on my way up to the restaurant, then I'm doing pretty well. But they're like any city. There are areas where you probably don't go. I found the countryside to give every indication of it being very, very safe, with, the Mercedes dealer that you could access the cars 24 hours a day and nobody's given them a 20-cent GT stripe. Dinners there are at 9 o'clock at night and you finish at 11 or midnight, and you see women walking by themselves back to their homes regularly. So, the gremlins aren't generally out in those areas. At no point in the last 3 months did I feel any sort of drama in Paraguay, any effort. I had a little bit of an incident in Argentina. The guy was either drunk or drugged or something, and unfortunately he tripped over and banged his head on the wall, and the police took him away. But it's very, very pleasant. You just don't get that vibe. I have a look around. The biggest thing for me is I notice the locals don't step on street grates when they're walking down pavement, down footpaths. So yeah, that's an indicator I probably shouldn't either. But I didn't feel any drama at any stage. You go down to the Parliament building and the police are all around it, and every one of them will say, hello, how are you? Have a bit of a chat. I found it to be very comfortable, and I wouldn't have any great qualms. I mean, look at Melbourne now. You know, it is absolutely better than Melbourne. They don't have machete bins there, and they're not having Broadmeadows shopping centre machete fights. Nothing like that's happening. So if you want to compare it to what, if you look at, there was I can't remember, there's a World Safety Index or something like that per 100,000 people, and Paraguay figures better than Australia on that index as far as violent crime goes. You know, there's petty crime, there's pickpocketing like there is anywhere, but I just did not get a feel for, see, or, you know, or be worried about any particularly violent crime. I think you do better there than a lot of cities in Australia.
What about, you mentioned guns before? I think some people might be interested in gun laws over in Paraguay. I mean, what about that? Can you said before that you're you like shooting and like going to the range and all that sort of thing. I mean, how did you find that?
I've been a competition shooter for 40 years. So is my father at 82. He won a state title in his 70s. Gun ownership, like anything, if you pass all the police clearances, if you're reasonable, and I mean, Paul can probably give you a bit of a better idea on the process, but I went to a couple of gun shops and talked to them and explained to them what I wanted to do and the competitions I wanted to shoot, and it was all very, very doable once you had your permanent residency, and that's completely reasonable. You commit to the country, you're now here, you're a permanent resident, you've shown you're going to stay, we will now trust you with a firearm. The firearms range, the availability is obviously a lot bigger than it is in Australia. You still, you know, you can't have full auto, you can't have silencers. There's a whole bunch of things you can't have. But the licensing seems to me is you're a fit and proper person. You now may own a firearm. If you misuse that, the consequences will be legendary, and I like that, you know. So Paul will probably give you a bit of a better idea on the licensing process.
Yeah, Paul, do you have anything to add about the gun laws in Paraguay?
I mean, it is quite simple, as Shane said. Now, you won't be able to get one on your temporary residency, which is the first 2 years, but when you do become a permanent resident, that's fine. Paraguay is not like Texas, where you can have a gun in your belt walking around. It's quite difficult to have concealed carry, so it's generally something for sporting or hunting, or something that you'd keep in your home for self-defense. But like Shane said, as long as you don't have a criminal record, you get everything properly registered, it's quite easy to obtain one once you're a permanent resident.
Yeah. Well, mate, we're at the end now. Thank you both of you for coming on. And I mean, I think this is definitely something that's very interesting and that should be considered by Australians, even, as I said before, even just a safety blanket. But I guess for people that are watching here in Australia and potentially in other parts of the world as well, what's your final pitch to them, and what would you like them to do if they want to reach out to you and get in contact?
Yeah, I mean, it's up to people to how they want to live their lives. There's a famous YouTuber, and he has a quote which is so true: "Go where you're treated best." Yeah. So if you feel you're treated best in Australia, or you want to stay and fight, absolutely do that. But if you think, maybe for yourself or your family, there could be a better opportunity, investigate. And potentially Paraguay is an option for people. I think you're going to show our YouTube and our Twitter. They're probably the best places to look at. If you just type Plan B Paraguay, either Twitter or YouTube, our details are going to come up. And then from there, you can learn a little bit more about what we do. See, there I am. And, potentially we can have a call and explain how the process would work for you viewers.
And before we wrap up, Shane, is there anything you want to get across to the audience before we finish? I mean, maybe a final experience that you've had while in Paraguay?
I don't think I felt in many, many years in Australia as relaxed and as comfortable with a vision for moving forward than I felt in Paraguay in the last 3 months. It's hard to do. It's almost like a relief. I can sit on a step, I can breathe easily, I can look forward and go, this is my life is going to be what I want it to be. And I mean, if anybody wants to reach out either via Paul or via you, I'm quite, I'm just a dude. I don't sell anything, I don't do anything. The processes are better handled by Paul, but if you want my opinion or you want a discussion or whatever, and if anybody does turn up over there, there's a really good Sky Bar on the top of the Dazzler that does $3 mojitos in happy hour.
Well, that sounds great. Look, mate, I think the thing for me in this discussion, I mean, I think everyone's in a different situation and a different stage of life. I mean, if I was a lot older, then I'd definitely be considering spending a few months of the year, in Paraguay or a similar country. I know people that live 6 months in Vietnam and places like that. So there's definitely that option for people out there. So this is just another option. And, I really do like how you framed the name of it, a Plan B. It's not necessarily a permanent, you have to do this now and the world's going crazy and falling down around you. It's more like a bit of an insurance policy, and you've got that as a backup if you need it. So, mate, best of luck with everything that you're doing. And also for you, Shane, as well. We'll keep in contact as always, and let me know what you're up to and what you finally do. But Paul, is there any plans for you to expand into other countries, maybe elsewhere in South America and places like that, or are you pretty settled on Paraguay?
I mean, I'm pretty good where I am right now. I'm happy. I think Paraguay's in the right direction, but like I said, it's one of many countries, so people should do their own research and find what works best for them. But anyway, mate, thanks for having me on the show today. I appreciate it.
No, it's been my pleasure. Yeah. Just finally, I mean, you gave your X and you gave your YouTube. Is there an email address or website for someone to go to?
Yes, you can just email us directly at info@planbparaguay.com, or one word as well, if they want to email me directly.
Yeah, awesome. All right, great. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming on. I've really enjoyed this chat and learning more about Paraguay. I didn't know anything about it before this episode tonight, so it definitely sounds like at least somewhere to visit as a tourist first and check it out. But it's been a pleasure talking to both of you, and maybe we can talk again in the future. And for everyone watching, thanks for watching, and please share this information out if you know anyone that's desperate to get out of Australia and looking for a new home. Maybe point them in the direction of this podcast. But for now, we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you.